Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 100 of The Casual Author. Today is Monday, December 4th, 2023, as I record this, and I'm thrilled to say that it's number 100. It's a momentous day, not only because of it being episode number 100, but I have a couple other really exciting announcements to bring up today, which I'm happy to get into. Before we dive into that, today we're actually talking to Blaise Hues, who is my co-author for the Kids of Cyber City trilogy. So today we're reflecting on our experience of co-authoring, the things we liked about it, things we learned, maybe things that could have gone better if we were to do it again. It's just a great reflection and a casual interview with her where we just talk about these things. I think we were both surprised by how well it went. And one of the announcements is that today is actually the published date of the trilogy in question. So The Kids of Cyber City is available in paperback and ebook on Amazon and in paperback and a lot of other retailers. I'll put a link to the show notes. These books were so much fun to write. So this is a sci-fi trilogy for middle grade age kids, so ages 8 to 12-ish. Younger could probably enjoy it if they have high reading level. Some of my kids could, they'd still enjoy it even though they're below the age. And of course, adults, if you like middle grade books, you'll love these. They're really fun to write. And like I said, they're available today. So that is one exciting announcement. I definitely did not expect co-authoring to be so much fun. I think Laura as well, Blaise Hues, was a little bit surprised as well because this was just kind of an experiment. She said, "Hey, let's just give it a go. Let's look on this pre-made cover website, find some covers, and make a story out of it." Coincidentally, the covers that we found had just like sample things on it. The sample on it was the Kids of Cyber City, and we're like, "Why not? let's write the Kids of Cyber City." I have to say, we'll talk a little bit about this in the interview, but I did not expect the story to take the direction that it did. But that's what happens when you get two discovery writers and put their heads together to write this story. Absolute blast to write it. I think you're going to love the interview, so stick around for that. So, aside from that, another exciting announcement from me is that I have created a community on Ream. So, if you're not familiar with Ream, Ream is a subscription-based system where people can support you as well as receive bonus content or early release content that you provide as an author. So, that's something that I'm doing. One thing that I identified as an author is that I can write relatively quickly and, plot-wise decently clean. Grammar wise, that's a different thing. But what I have a hard time getting it to the publishing stage. Editing is just such an arduous thing for me. It's challenging for me. It's expensive for me. And I recognize this about myself. It's just not my favorite part of the writing process. That being said, because I can write really quickly, I see no reason to not provide that for you early, right? The beta versions, or in some cases, alpha, depending on what I'm providing for you. So Ream is an opportunity for me to deliver that to you as my readers. So if you want to take a look at it, I have some more information about what I'm providing. You'll get those early release chapters on a monthly basis. I think it's, 1 to 2 chapters per month for both my YA side of things as well as the epic fantasy side of things, because I'm always writing both, because why not? Then there's some additional perks and bonuses if you want to take a look at those. So you can find that at reamstories.com/Dan Kenner. So I'll put a link in the show notes. Once again, that is reamstories.com/Dan Kenner. So reamstories.com/DANKENNER. I'm actually proud of myself for spelling that without making a mistake. So it's one of those things where I tend to stumble up on my words when I say important things. So I'm proud of myself for that. Regardless, we're gonna have a blast. The Ream, it's a community. You can even join and follow me for free. You don't even have to pay me anything if you don't want access to those chapters. I put the first couple chapters up of both Dragon Blooded as well as The Etcher's Plight, which is, if you've been listening for a while, you know that is the epic fantasy book I finished forever ago. They're all, I'm planning on releasing those to you. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun experiment. If you'd like to give it a go, take a look at that link. And yeah, we're just going to have a fun time with it. Probably add more things over time. There's definitely a lot of options for things that I can add to that. But in other author news, I did finish the short story that I took a hiatus for to enter for the Writers of the Future competition next quarter. It's called Darkness Incarnate. It is a little bit more dark than I expected it to be, but not in a bad way. It's just very heavy deep themes. The main character is definitely haunted. We'll just say it that way. But I think it ends pretty well. I was thrilled with the ending, and it's clocking in at about 14,000 words, which I laugh at myself because I thought it would be shorter. I was like, oh, I'm gonna hit around maybe 10,000, but knowing myself, I don't know why I pretend like I'll write anything shorter. Regardless, it's done, which means I'm back to Demon Blooded. I wrote Demon Blooded again today, and it's fun. I'm able to pick it up right where I left off. Do I really remember where I was going? Not 100%, but that as a discovery writer, I don't really care. There's lots of great options in terms of writing the story, so I just picked it up, kept writing it, had a good time. So I'm going to keep moving along with that now that I've got the short story out of the way. I do have to edit that, which once again, we just talked about. Editing is not my favorite part. So I'm going to set that aside for a couple weeks. Probably should only do a week because the deadline's quickly approaching for submitting that short story. So, we'll see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I'm just providing lots of fun short stories for you that you can enjoy as readers. I'll have to try my hand at some YA short stories. I don't know if I've ever done that before. So maybe we'll have to give it a go for one of these submissions. Other than that, just the promotion for the end of November was a great time. Thank you for those of you that supported me and purchased those 99-cent books. Everything is back to normal price now. So you'll have to keep an eye out for more deals if you missed that one. Nothing else in terms of the author updates. So in terms of Homestead updates, not a lot there either. We did stop milking. So I don't know if I talked about this a little bit last week, but we're going through some sickness right now as a family. In fact, last week on my podcast, I'm sure you heard my voice. It was not 100%. Still kind of congested. It's not my favorite time, but it is what it is. Just keep plugging along. I work from home, so there's really no point in taking time off work or anything. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have admitted that. Regardless, I'm not great at taking time off. So anyway, the reason that's relevant is my wife said, we were planning on milking the 4 goats until the end of December, but she's like, I just can't get out of bed. I'm having a hard time waking up early enough to go out. So how about we stop milking almost all of the goats and instead you just milk the one. So Adele, she's our best goat. She's amazing. She gives lots of milk. She's well behaved. And so that's what we did. We stopped milking the other ones. And now we're just milking one goat, which is great because this is a good trial for what it might be like to only have a cow to milk, because that's what it would mean if we ended up getting a cow. We would just milk the one animal. Granted, it would be a lot more milk. She's only giving us like a little bit more than a quart each day. So not a ton, but it's great. It's just enough to feed our infant. So our 11-month-old, she's almost a year. We need to transition her to cow's milk at in this case, goat's milk. She's still breastfeeding, which we absolutely love. My wife's planning on doing that as long as possible, but she needs to be also used to goat's milk. So we just want to keep that on hand as long as possible. Anyway, that means I get to do it myself. So first, my wife sleeps in, which is wonderful. And I go out with the kids, the boys, they do all their chores, feed the goats and everything. And then I just milk the one goat, Adele. And yeah, it's been fun. That's a little bit of an adjustment for us. Toulouse, who is our buck, I've never said his name, I realize. He's still in the pen with them. He's very annoying. Fortunately, he doesn't try to touch me anymore. He used to want to rub up and jump on you like a dog. I'm dude, none of that. But he hasn't really tried that as much recently. I think he's kind of understands that we don't want to touch him. He can have his own space and be happy, and he's having a good time. Although I think the does are really bothered by him. I think now that they're bred, they're just bothered by his presence. We still have to wait a couple of weeks just to make sure. We had an incident last year, I want to say 2 years ago, where we had a goat that we thought was bred, and then we brought him out, and then she wasn't. And so it's just unfortunate because there's really no way to validate that unless you leave them and look for signs. So we learned our lesson, and he gets to stay for a few more weeks. We'll just try to make the does as comfortable as possible while he is as annoying as he is. Other than that, things got really cold, snowed for a bit. Our children went out and spent all day playing in the snow, which I'm totally a fan of. They made these massive snowballs because it was really sticky snow that were, more than half their height. I'm impressed that they were pushing these massive things around. Unfortunately, it is warming up now. It's raining right now, and unusually, so their snowballs are melting, and they're pretty disappointed about that. I should have grabbed a picture while they were out there. There's just massive snowballs. They just kept making them. I don't know if they ever planned on turning them into snowmen. I didn't have a chance to go out with them before it started melting. So maybe that was their plan, and they just were too big to lift them up. Anyway, I just love that our kids go out and play. They have a blast outside. They're outside most of the time, which I'm a little bit jealous of because when I was a kid, I did go out sometimes, but not as much as them. Their childhood is very different compared to my own. So, life on the homestead. What can you say? Yeah, no, nothing else to report on that front. So that being said, we can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion of the podcast with Laura. Hey, Laura, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Doing great. Excited to think about and how do I say this? Remember our experience co-authoring this trilogy together because there's lots of ups and downs with it. Before we get into any of that fun stuff, how long have you been writing and publishing?
Oh man. Let's see. I'm not going to do the math, so I'll just give ages. People can do the math themselves.
Love it. I think it's
Um,
great.
I got I wrote my first book when I was sophomore in high school and submitted it out, got rejection letters from everyone. I ended up writing four other short novels before I got first offer of publication. So I published my first book when I was 19 with a small Canadian press, and that was a lot of fun. And I've published with multiple other publishing companies since then. It's been fun. I've learned things from each one of them.
And
And
so
now
now
I'm 33, so people
there's
can do
so the
the math
math.
of how long I've been doing it.
I mean, it's great. I love to hear people who have written books when they were in their teenage years. I only did reading. I wanted to write, never actually did any writing until I got old. I didn't start till I was about 28 was when I really got into it. But so now you primarily publish your books through Stag Beetle Books, which is the
Yes,
publishing company that you also own, correct?
yes, yeah. Well,
So
I mean, after working with a bunch of publishers and learning from them, seeing things I loved and some things I didn't love, um, and then I went and got a master's in creative writing and had been networking. I felt like I'm comfortable and ready to take this plunge into starting a small publishing company for young adult fiction in middle grade and um, kind of being able to craft the experience that I wanted for other authors, based on my experiences with some other publishing companies. And I felt like there was a need for some more young adult publishers. I loved working with the publishing companies that I did. Um, the reason I ended up switching to multiple times is because they stopped publishing young adult. Um, and well, I think I disappeared for a second there. My back.
you're back.
And then
You're
okay, I'm back. But yeah, I felt like there was a need and it was something that I felt comfortable and confident in doing based on, you know, over a decade of experience.
I mean, I think it's awesome that you recognize this need. This hey, these publishing companies aren't meeting my needs in these areas, or they're not publishing what you're writing. So why not take it into your own hands and publish not only your books but other people's books because you accept submissions for the publishing company. I think it's once every
I
quarter. Is
do.
that right?
Well, the first week of every month, we're open to submissions.
Oh, monthly. Okay,
So
very good. Well, I admittedly have never thought about publishing with a publishing company because, there's all sorts of options with publishing. I think there's a lot of authors that don't realize this. I know I learned it over time that it's not just agent or self-publish, right? There's so much more options.
well,
Like
and so much of it is a choose your own adventure, right?
yep, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize all of the options. So that being said, in less than actually when this podcast comes out, the books will be published, which is great. Be published with a publishing company, which is Stag Beetle Books, which is fascinating to me. The whole process is. I hope you've been patient with me as we figure things out because I've never done this
Yeah,
before.
no, it's been
Uh,
fun.
but you know your stuff,
I
which is
really enjoy the
excellent.
process. I mean, that's part of the reason I did the publishing company is because I really enjoy the process of publishing as well. Like I think celebrating every little success, it's, I think every single step is worth, I don't know, worth celebrating. When you do a first round of edits, when you finish the draft, when playing with cover art, coming up with a marketing plan, working best channels of distribution depending on which genre it is. And I think that it's all really, really fun. So
which is
it's not a matter
perfect.
of being patient with you. It's been like a very enjoyable process for me.
That's good. You and I are very different. I don't love the publishing process. I mean, to be fair, I do love it all to certain extents. I don't, editing is not my favorite thing in the world. I do love making things better and improving it. The sheer amount of things can feel overwhelming, and sometimes I was just like, I would just like be able to write this and then click publish. Right. That's not really an option. I've got all the fun stuff in between, all of the editing and the format. Actually, I don't dislike the formatting. That really aligns with my operational brain. I love the formatting, making it look pretty and
Hmm.
getting it all uploaded. That stuff is fun. It's mainly the editing. Something about getting a manuscript back with thousands of red marks on it makes me want to just throw it out the window and say, I'm just going to start something new. So,
I mean,
but
that I think that's relatable for all authors. It's just like the emotional roller coaster of going from being like, this is the best thing that's ever been written. Everyone needs to read it. And the next week you're like, it's garbage.
it's
like
horrible.
I'm done. Like, why did I
Terrible.
do this?
Yep, that definitely. So that being said, I'm curious to know, and I don't think we've ever discussed this, but where did our conversation begin when it comes to co-authoring? Because I just remember we were just chatting about something random, and then suddenly you're like, "Hey, have you ever thought about co-authoring with someone?" Where did that come from? Is that something you've been wanting to do for a while?
I have always wanted to write middle grade. I mean, I say always, but I should say, since I was 18, I've thought,
Yeah,
that'd be kind of fun to do middle grade. And when I was a young adult, I thought, well, I should write young adult. I can do an authentic young adult character, an authentic young adult voice because I was a young adult. And then,
right.
as I've gotten older, I'm like, I am 33. I am not I'm not a 17-year-old. I'm not 16. I'm not, one of my books, the main character is a 17-year-old boy who's in prison, and I had a lot of fun doing his voice. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to just do authentic, you know, Lara's voice. So I might as well shoot for younger. And especially now that I have kids that are that age. And a lot of their peers have been asking me, like, oh, can I read your books? And I'm like, no, you really can't.
Maybe not.
It's not for you. Um, and a lot of my friends have kids that are same age as my kids. They're middle grade readers, and they're like, "Can my kids read your books?" And I'm like, not those ones. But I wanted to write something they could read that I could share with them, and um, so I wanted to do middle grade, and I also thought, hey, it'd be really fun to co-author a book. Why not do it at this? Why not do it at the same time?
Right.
And you and I had been interacting. We kind of gotten to know each other through Bookstagram, and I'd been getting your newsletters, kind of getting familiar with your writing process. And I thought, you know what? I feel like this could work. Like I think Dan has a writing process that we could make this happen. Um and you were told, I was like, I feel like he'd be game to try it out. And then you were. And I was thrilled that that you were like, let's try it. Why not?
It's funny on the back end of it. Now that these books are published, it's insane to think that that conversation even happened, right? Because the whole process, it wasn't like perfectly smooth, but it just happened so quickly in my mind. Just like, oh wow, that actually happened. And I think one thing that really helped was knowing that you were equally as flexible in figuring it out. So you're like, I've never really done it. I've always been interested in it. I've also never written middle grade. So it's kind of a learning process for both of us. But I think, coming into it knowing, hey, neither of us are really clear on what the process looks like, and it worked out for our benefit because we just kind of paved the way for the books and for ourselves. Now we haven't gotten to the marketing game of it quite yet because how do you market a middle grade book? I'm not sure. But the actual writing of it, I think turned out relatively good. Would you agree? Do you think it went pretty smoothly?
I mean, I'm thrilled with it. I feel like it was an interesting process. And I feel like there was a lot of pivoting,
It was a lot of
but
fiction.
I learned a lot. So I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and usually what they say is you win or you learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's true in life. And I feel like there were things that they worked or we learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to kind of reframe and not be like we failed or that it's not that it didn't work, it's that we learned something from it. Um, I loved the co-author process with you because you write very quickly, and that helped us to really kind of get things going. Because I'd be like, all right, the ball's in your court. You got to write this chapter. Next thing I know, my phone dings, and you're like, oh, I did it. We're done. And I'm like, it's been
Yeah.
12 hours,
Crap.
Dan.
Yeah. Well, I think for
And
me, it was just fun to do that. But
it was really fun. And I think that the fact that we didn't have sky high expectations helped us to really have fun with it. And ultimately, I think that's part of why it ended up being so successful is because we removed a lot of the pressure and we were able to have fun and then as a result write something that's really fun.
Mm-hmm. It is the story turned out. I think the funny thing is we both are kind of, I would say, on the pantsing side, the discovery writing side of things,
Hmm.
obviously with different scales. I just remember so many conversations we were going into. You're like, so where are you going with this chapter? I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I have no idea. I just wrote this chapter based off of what you wrote. I ended it with some type of cliffhanger type situation. And then you're like, I don't really know what to do. And so I just remember trying to put our heads together. We only realized about what halfway through the first book or near the end of the first book that we were going to be bringing in the an alien aspect to it, which was fascinating,
Yeah.
something we didn't really think about. And we just played
Surprise.
with it, and it was just like, surprise, this is great. um but for me, that doesn't stress me out. Were you ever stressed going into writing your chapters, like, I don't know where Dan's going with this, I don't know what to do?
I think there were the only times I felt stressed is when I was like, I feel like you were trying to surprise me.
Oh.
And I was like, you can't surprise me as the co-author. Like you can't. And I was like, well, I didn't want to do anything that would sabotage any of your plans.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, he doesn't have any plans. Like you're not going to sabotage his
I,
plans because
no
he didn't plan.
plans. No plans.
um, I don't know. It wasn't stressful. It wasn't stressful for me to write because so for people listening, what we did is there's like a main female character and a main male character. And so I wrote primarily for the female character and he wrote for the male character. And so we got these two points of view and they for the most part, yes, they swap off from
Yeah, for
chapter
the
to
most part.
chapter. But it was really fun because I felt like I was able to get in my character, Sadie, and stay as her. And it was, I felt like it was really fun. And I think that the fact that we were pantsing it made it more authentically middle grade because, as a fourth grader, it's not like she's thinking 12 steps ahead. And so I
That's
felt
true.
like I was like, this is exactly how this would go because she's not some genius. She's just kind of a normal, feisty, a little bit rebellious fourth grade girl who's learning and kind of pushing back against authority and learning, a little bit of responsibility. And as a result, I felt like the mood of pantsing and not necessarily knowing where we're going next made it read as a very authentic voice of middle graders who are like, well, let's do this. And it's like, you guys didn't think this through. And it's like, well, of course she didn't. She's in fourth
Right.
grade. Like she's 9
Yep.
years old. and I,
Absolutely.
when and when we go back and we look at it, I'm like, you know what? This turned out this turned out so much better than I even realized it was when we were in the process. Because
Hmm.
there's always that writer doubt where you're like, what's gonna happen and how is this going? And are we gonna have to go back and scrap this? And we didn't have to because it was I don't know, I feel like it went exactly as it was supposed to.
Well, and I think going into the onset, going into this situation, I think we both agreed. We knew that being discovery writers, it was okay to not know where we were going. My full plan, which good or bad, going into this was, I'll just play off of whatever she writes, and then she'll just play off of whatever I write, and it'll all come together. And I agree. I was really surprised by the end how it feels very tight considering the situation where we came from. We did have to do a little bit of a reevaluation at the beginning of the second or middle of the second book. We're like, something's missing, right? We're missing
Yeah.
something that's important to a middle grade story, which ended up being a villain of some sort. Like, that's it. We're missing that villain. We need to put that in there. And so we did have to go back and add a little bit of villain in the back end. But that's it. I mean, other than that, it just kind of flowed to the end. We have the story, and I love the way it turned out as well. It's interesting that you brought up the compulsion factor because that's something I don't really think about. But now that you've mentioned it, yeah, thinking about the decisions that Sadie and Jason make and the things they do is just like, yeah, that was really not smart in hindsight, or the way you react to
Well,
that
they do so
situation.
much like by the seat of their pants. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, have you met fourth graders?
Yeah, it's true.
That's
It's
kind
very true.
of their MO.
And
I mean, I know
they're,
it's your podcast, but I brought some questions for you because it's your book
please.
too. So I was
Yeah, please.
surprised.
Yeah. This is great. I
I
discover my
wanted to know
life as I go.
what what for you was the most fun part of the process? Or was there like a, without giving spoilers, like a scene that you enjoyed writing, or I mean, because it's 3 books. So
So
what stood out to you as like when you were having like a really good time?
I love the entire thing, and I'm not just being dumb, right? No, that sounds so cheesy. Enjoy the whole process, but really, the creation process is where I jive in all of my writing, and this was without exception. Also, the most fun part was just the entire story. The thing that for me was most enjoyable was not knowing. So I already know what's not going to happen, but I've added an element of there's a literal another human brain with ideas that I have no idea. Like I didn't know what to expect. So for me, I was always eager to open up your chapter and be like, what did she throw at me? I want to see what I have to deal with. That was fun for me, right? And a lot of people might see them be stressed out. Plotters, it's probably their nightmare. But for me, I was hoping that you're going to throw some random things in there. Like, cool, what do I get to deal with? What do I need to figure out? Sadie's situation. How do I mesh Jason in there or whatever? What does he have to save her or what? Just I didn't know what to expect. So for me, that was the fun part. Um, I just really love the not knowing. Being able to discover it alongside you was so fun. But for you, what was the most fun part?
Well, I mean, like you said, it was really fun to not have to necessarily plan plot twists because you threw them at me.
I
So I'd be
did,
like,
yeah.
plot twist, he did it. Um, there's one scene where in one of Sadie's chapters, she's talking to Jason and they're having a back and forth chat in something called a ghost zone. I'm sure you
Yep,
remember.
I do
And
remember that.
I didn't want to write too much dialogue for Jason
Yep.
because it's a little earlier on, and I didn't feel like I had as good of a grip on his character. So obviously, I can't have you write every single line of dialogue that Jason ever says in the whole book. But I felt like with this back and forth, I wanted it to feel more like Sadie and Jason are talking. And I remember I was at my daughter's soccer practice and I was messaging you and I was like, hey, do you have time to jump in as Jason and do like a in real life time chat with me?
Yep.
And then you did. And we jumped in, and that was one of the most fun moments I've ever had writing any scene because it
It's
felt
fun.
like I am this character and she's having this conversation right now. And I mean, I literally just copy and pasted that conversation and put it in the manuscript. And I
That's
was
right.
like, this scene is so fun. And writing that scene was so fun. And I've also never written at a soccer practice before. So that to me added some of the element of, I guess, fun because we're here and I'm typing on my phone and I don't do that. Like I have, I sit in my office here, I type on my computer, and instead I was at soccer practice typing, but I was like, but that's what it is. Like she's on her own device texting him and you were texting back. And I was like, this is actually really fun and turns into what I think is a delightful scene.
Agree. And I think it turned out more authentic because of that. And I remember the same thing. It was just like
Yeah.
we left the writing phase and went into almost, it sounds so cheesy, but like the role playing. Like I don't know if that's necessarily
I
what we're
mean,
doing, but kind of, right? It was just like, well, I mean,
yeah,
we
I
know the
mean,
situation. I'm in Jason's head, you're in Sadie's. This is what she says. This is how Jason would react. And it
here's
was
this
fun.
conversation. Yeah.
No, it was just a real
So I,
conversation.
I really enjoyed that.
The part that I love leading off of that is by the third book, you wrote phrases or, dialogue by the character slash characters I was writing, and I would write things by Sadie. And, it was nice when I read some of the stuff yours, like, that sounds exactly like him. Like, that's funny, that
Yeah.
you've captured his personality. And then a couple times you're like, yeah, that's exactly how Sadie would behave, her kind of snooty, almost not egotistic, but just very
Yeah. Well,
confident,
some
that
of her
her confident
responses, yeah,
approach. It's funny. It's just great that we were able to adopt that by the third book. We really learned each other's characters. So I think that was a great exercise to get into that phase, though.
yeah, that was
It's
that
really
was
fun.
really fun.
But so for you, I know you have some questions, which you can toss them out at any time. But I want to know on the flip
Okay.
side, the most challenging part for you, not
Most
necessarily
challenging
negative,
part.
just like were there any parts that were challenging in terms of working with another person co-authoring?
Most challenging part. You did world building a lot faster than I did.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the most challenging part for me was man, I don't want to give spoilers. Okay, I'm gonna try to talk about it in a way that will make sense but
Bro-
not spoil everything. I mean, I
Broadly.
assume that the middle grade readers themselves will not be listening to this. Maybe it's their parents who will be. and then recommending it to them.
I hope
So
so.
there's a character. One of your characters has possesses certain abilities
Uh-huh. Yes.
that you had a firm grasp on. All
Wow.
right, I'm gonna do some spoilers.
That's
So
fine.
sorry about this. So he's an alien, and he's kind of got these octopus abilities where he changes color depending on emotion.
Uh-huh.
And I had the most difficult time remembering which color represented which emotion. And also kind of they're almost like empaths.
Uh-huh.
And I just had like you would write these chapters and I would be like, yeah, that all makes sense. But then I would go to write anything about this character and I'm like, I don't understand what he can do.
Yeah.
And I would be like trying to write and I'd be like, I'm in this great rhythm, but then it's like, oh shoot, he's supposed to change color. And I would like type in all caps color here because I was like, I don't have time to go back and find my color
Hmm.
key of what color he's supposed to turn
Well,
now that
I think the problem was we didn't have a
he's
color key,
sad.
right? For the longest time. I
Right.
think
You
we
had
finally
you
had
had
to
it in
write
your
it down.
head, and then I texted you,
Yeah.
and I was like, I really do need a key. So for me, that was the most challenging is that you had this alien character who's really fun and I love to read about, but every time I would go to write him, for the I guess the first few chapters that he shows up, I was like, I don't know what to do. And so it was fun because I could put some of that confusion into Sadie, where
Yep.
she's like, I don't know, why do you keep changing colors? Like, what's that supposed to mean? And
Yep.
but as far as writing him, that was a big challenge for me. And I felt like I had to keep asking you clarifying questions on this. What is he able to do? What are the limitations of his powers? What is he, if he does this, is that legit? And so some of that, I guess, like character building, that was a challenge for me because I felt like it took me a little bit longer to get on the same page.
Well, okay, to be fair, I'm going to give you some credit because you're being very nice about the way you're talking about it. I don't get offended by anything. I will go out and say I am terrible at communicating this type of stuff. This was coming into this. I knew this would be a problem, right? I don't take notes on anything. It all comes from my head. The note taking part of it, I resist it. I have my whole life. I hated taking notes in school. I would just absorb information and it would stick there. So note taking is like the bane of my existence. And so I recognized going into this, like, oh, this is going to be a problem, right? And I didn't do anything about it. And you were so patient and kind. And finally, like, can you just like write some stuff down? Yeah, I should write some crap down. Like that's what I need to do. So it's totally okay to talk about that. Like the reality of it is that's a struggle of mine is to notate things. And yeah, it's all in my head. And I didn't bring you along super well on that journey. And so you were just like making some assumptions based on the little tidbits I dropped. So, totally fine that you paused, like, just write some stuff down for me. But then, on the flip side, the ironic thing is, I think this is where, working with two different people, for me, the most challenging piece was you asked me questions that I couldn't answer. And it wasn't like your fault. You were just seeking some like meaning in it wasn't like I wouldn't say dips into the plotting yet, but still they were just like, well, what are your
Hmm.
plans for X? Or like, what does this mean? Or where you're going? And I just didn't know the answer. I'm like, I don't know. Like, and it's for me, it was hard to be able to answer those questions because I didn't know the answer to any of them. I was figuring it out as I went. And so it was just funny, some of the conversations we had, where we ultimately brought in this alien aspect and, the villain and everything. I just remember you asking me questions. I was like, I feel like I need to write the next chapter to answer that question, which isn't always the right answer, right? You should be able to plan some things ahead. It's just not the way I work. So it was fun. I never felt frustrated at any given time. I did feel a little bit bad sometimes because I was like, I hope she's not stressed or frustrated where we are. But I think it all resolved in the end. We wrote through it and made it to the end.
I just
So I
thought it
hope
was
you
fun.
feel well.
I just felt like you were like, well, you'll have to wait and see. And I'm like, okay, better write the next chapter and then I'll
Well, that was
then I'll
because I
know.
didn't know. I wasn't trying to be like, sneaky or anything. I literally didn't know the answers to the question. So that was kind of the funny thing. What other questions or thoughts do you have? You said you had some questions. Toss
Oh,
them at
so
me.
I
Let's hear
do,
it.
yeah. So one of the questions I had was if because well it's not phrased very well, but the question is um with regard to the challenge of that you and I do typically write for an older audience. So the fact that it was specifically middle grade, what challenges did that pose for you in your writing, keeping in mind that it was for a younger audience?
Complex themes. I think is where I struggled.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you noticed this, and I don't know if we ever like specifically scaled back on anything, but there was an innate temptation to add more complicated, like adult related, like political kind of potential really dark aspects. Now, I think middle grade can be dark to some degree, but there's a certain level where it's just like, all right, there's too many concepts in this book. We were targeting a short word count as well. And that's not the
Hmm.
way, right? I overcomplicate plots. I add so many like elements and controversy and things like that. And I think for me, noticing that it was middle grade, I was like, I need to add that stuff, but to a certain level, so that we're not tempted to write an 80,000 a pit word third book just to wrap everything up. So for me, that was the most, keeping it simple but intriguing was challenging for me. What about for
Hmm.
you? What was the most challenging aspect of middle grade voice?
I mean, I would say there were two things that were challenging for me. One was vocabulary words. I
Well,
I love to be verbose. And there were times when I would write something and then I'd have my 11-year-old come in and I'd be like, hey, can you read this sentence to me? And she'd read it aloud. And I'm like, do you know what it means? And she's like, nope. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. Like, let's pick a different word. And I do want to have, you want to have the right balance of challenging vocabulary words so that they can learn them. But if
right.
there are too many, then it doesn't read like a middle grade novel. So some of that, but without dumbing it down too much. I guess finding that balance of, you don't want just like basic sentences. You want to be using active verbs. You want to be making it fun and keeping the
Mhm.
pace right. And not in, I mean, a big thing you want to do as an author is you do not want to insult your audience
Right.
by writing down to them. And so I was like, well, I want to put some hard words in because then they can learn them because kids are smart, but I also
They
didn't
are.
want to overwhelm them. So that was a challenge. Another challenge for me is that I tend to write, I don't know why, but like I write violent scenes. And I was like, I
Do
do not want this to be a violent novel. You're like, I've read your stuff. That's true.
I have read
Yes.
your
And
stuff? Yes, it's very true.
I don't know why. Um, I'm a nice person in real life. But when I write, there just tends to be a lot of violence. And I don't like to kill off characters. It just, in my writing, it happens. And so I was like, no one's dying in these books. This is a middle grade book. Like we're not going to off anybody, but we want there to be some intensity and some age appropriate fear,
Yeah, and
but
danger
not
for sure.
violence.
Mhm.
And I felt like that was a little bit of a hard balance for me, is because I was like, but is it scary? And I'm like, well, are you 9? Like,
Yeah, that's
like
true.
it's not going to scare you, but like, are you a 9-year-old? And I felt like some of our most productive conversations that we had were about some of the themes we wanted to do. We
Mhm.
kind of just reminded each other. In middle grade, it's usually about saving friends and family. The circle of who you're trying to rescue is like yourself, your friends, your family. Whereas young adult, it's going to be bigger, right? Like Harry Potter, they got to save Hogwarts, which is a bigger area, more people to save.
Yeah.
And in adult books, it's usually like we have to save the world.
Right.
Um, and like fourth graders are not supposed to have feel like they need to save the world, and not even like they have to save Cyber City. So for us, we were like, they're not going to save Cyber City. Like they can't, because
The
that's
kids.
too much of a burden to put on these
Mhm.
little kids. Like the kids at Cyber City, they already have so much going on. And so this story was like a reminder of like keeping it age appropriate with the goals and with what makes a hero. Um and so that I felt like those were very productive conversations that we had about some of our goals for the book.
Yep.
But I
Well, I
kept
agree.
wanting to be like, but what about all the other kids in Cyber City? We have to
Hmm.
save everybody. It's like, well, that's not what middle grade is. Like
Yep.
that's not how it works.
Spin-off series of the aftermath of these books, because some crap goes down. Let's just say that stuff goes down in Cyber City. We'll say
It
that.
ends. I love the way it
I
ends.
love the ending. I do. I think it's so great.
I really love
Um,
the ending.
but yeah, maybe we should write a YA trilogy. No, we shouldn't tempt ourselves. There's so much to
Yeah,
write.
when
But
they
we could
grow
write
up,
the after
give
effects of,
Sadie some time.
well, I mean, we could either let them grow up or pick up new characters. Say like, hey, this is the result of
Right.
what
Well,
happened as a result of these other characters. Now we're in YA characters' heads 2 days after the aftermath of situations, and see where we go with it. I could totally write a story off of that.
yeah,
Not suggesting anything,
that could be
but
fun. Also fun. would be in 5 years
That's true.
when
We could do
Sadie's a young
5 years
adult.
later. That would change the tone of the story quite a bit for sure, in terms
Yeah.
of what might have changed and everything. Anyway, we're not writing new books. We're not getting caught up in things.
We're not doing this. This isn't a brainstorm session for the next
as
series, but it could
as
be.
becomes a brain I seriously could be. I think that's for me, that aligns with the complex themes issue, because yeah, there was a temptation to be like, this should be bigger. I mean, there are some middle grade books where it's saving the world or saving New York City. I'm thinking specifically kind of the Percy Jackson type, although that's kind of like on the
Hmm.
fence of middle grade and YA. It's like right
Yeah.
in the
I mean,
middle
I would say
there.
it leans more YA.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I mean, he starts out as 11 or something in the books, right? And then it spans
He,
over years.
uh,
I don't remember. Or is it 12?
I have to confess, I did not read them.
What? It's okay. I'm not
I'm
offended,
so
or
sorry.
nor do
I'm
I judge
familiar
you.
with them, but I did not read them.
Well, they're
Uh,
worth it. You should definitely would read them.
it's,
But that's what I was thinking in terms of writing these books. And yeah, that temptation to write bigger was challenging.
mhm.
So I guess for you, and this isn't necessarily any of the conversation, but I am curious, would you do this again? I know you're co-authoring a book with your daughter. Well, what about co-authoring with another author again? Is this something that's in the future again for L. Blaise Hues co-authoring?
I love, yeah, I mean, I would be totally open to it. Really, with anyone, I think the process, it would be very different depending on who I'm co-authoring with. Like the
Yeah,
process
for
with
sure.
you, completely different from the process with my daughter. Um, because with her, I have to be like, you have to do more. She wants me to do more than my share. And I'm like, if you want your name on the cover, you have to do the work. Like it has to be like you have to earn it, right? And that doesn't mean it has to be 50-50. I think you and I kept trying so hard to make it like even.
Yeah, and
I'm like, I don't want you to do too much. I don't want you to feel like it's like I'm taking over. But I feel like, if I were to write with someone who's a big planner, it would
mhm,
be a lot more difficult because they would want to sit down and hash things out. I've talked to my husband about authoring with him. He's an author, but he usually writes more academic things,
yeah,
articles. He does sort of like the as opposite from young adult fiction as you could possibly get.
mhm,
He does like research and analysis, and it's amazing. But he has fantastic ideas for fiction. If he were to write, I think he would write more in like the style of Dan Brown. And I think that he would want everything outlined perfectly. He wrote a book, and it I would tease him because I gave him an award for writing the longest outline ever written because it was actually the book, but he just kept calling it the outline. And so
that's
like
the
if I were to write
book.
a book with him, I think it would be extremely challenging because he would want everything planned, everything outlined, and I would be game. I would love to try it. Um, but it's kind of funny because I'm willing to try everything. I'm willing to try almost anything at least twice.
Oh, that's good. The first time is kind of learning, and the second time you get to go at it again and apply those learnings.
Yeah,
But it would be a different experience with plotter. I can say that with Sfinity. I think
I
when
think it'd
we
be I think it would be different.
Yes. I think going into it was, I think in any, and this is just a piece of advice for anybody who's considering co-authoring, you just need to go in with a certain level of flexibility. Because if both authors, and I've heard this from other people who co-author who and failed, I don't mean failed like in the sense of they failed, more that they never actually reached publication, was primarily because of
Mm,
dying on hills that don't actually matter. I think when it came down to it, and the writing of the third book, I wrote a little bit more of the third book than you, which I don't care. Like I don't care. The thing is just like
right.
there's too much nickel and diming on everything. I was just wanting to write this fun story. I didn't care who did more work. I was just grateful I wasn't writing the whole thing. Just like,
Yeah.
I'm writing not the whole thing. So that's great. Whatever it comes out to be is excellent. So I think once we reached that point, it was easier to just let go and just paint the story, put the story together.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I kept trying to not sabotage you, and then I went and got your character captured, and then it made it a little harder for you to write to write
well,
your
I mean,
character because
I seriously didn't feel any stress from that. I was just like, all right, like we'll figure it
you're
out.
like, oh,
I was like, well, we'll
yeah,
make
well,
it
good.
work. Seriously, I'm relatively unfazed by anything because I've been shocked by my brain dozens, probably nearly 100 times since I've been writing my books. I never know what to expect. I'll go into a story expecting a character to die. They don't. or going to a story expecting a character to just be a side character and suddenly they're possessed and they're a main character. It's just like, huh, that's interesting. I don't know where that came from. So I think knowing that, nothing you threw at me really stressed me out. It just
I
made me
feel like
want to
that's
write more.
probably pretty common.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's a common experience for authors because that happens to me where I'll be writing something and then I'm like, I did not see that coming. That
Yep.
surprised me. And I try to explain that to people and they're like, what do you mean? Like, you wrote it. Like, it's all happening in your head. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I know, but I think when you make a character complex enough, they do take on a
Hmm.
life of their own.
They do.
And there's a Christmas movie about it, with like Charles Dickens. I think it's called A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
No, it's called,
Yeah. I think
is that what
so.
it's called? And I
I think
love
so.
that movie. I did not expect to love it, but I like that story and I love the way they presented it because the characters, um, like they come to life around him almost like ghosts,
Hmm.
and they argue with each other and they argue with him. And I was like, that is exactly what it feels like writing. Is that like, I'm like, I don't want you to die, but then they're like, but I'm gonna go anyway. And I'm like, you'll die if you do that. And they're like, but I'm doing it. I'm like, I
Yeah.
tried so hard to keep you alive. And, people will tease me. They're like, why did you kill off this character? I'm like, I had nothing to do with it. I was an
They did it.
innocent bystander. I recorded the events. But sometimes characters, they surprise me.
Yep.
Some like pop up and I'm like, wait, you had a crush on them? Like I didn't tell you to do that. Like that was your
Hmm.
motivation. And I love that part of writing. That part of is the process of when the characters take on a life of their own. It's kind of sometimes hard as the author to be like, no, I'm in charge and I need to keep this story on course.
Yep. I think that's a fun thing for me though. And I can't, I'm not a plotter, so I can't speak to it, but I suspect that the level of character driving your story is differentiates by how much planning you have ahead of time. You know, oftentimes I'll just come up with a situation and like I said, you have complex characters and all you know is how that character would behave in certain situations. And so I would be
Mm-hmm.
writing and something happens that I was like, I don't know where that came from, but all I know is how this character would react, positive, negative, smart, stupid. This is how they would react. And it's just like, well, let's write the fallout of that decision you made, right? Because that's who you are. And I think for me, that's really why I love these cyber study books and why I love any books that are really character driven is it just feels so authentic. These characters with faults and, strengths and weaknesses doing these things, whether you like it or not, it makes you feel closer to the story, even as a reader. They're just like you feel like that character is being true to themselves, whoever they are. If ever I fall out of that as a reader, it frustrates me. That's when I put the book down because he's like, well, the author took a little too much control. In this book,
Yeah.
this character is not behaving the way I would assume they would behave by the way they've been written. So fascinating, fun times. In any case, we are running a little bit short on time. We could talk for hours about this. So, since you are the publisher, we can both talk about this at any given time. But where can people find the Kids of Cyber City books?
Kids of Cyber City is, I mean, Amazon is, you can always find it on Amazon in ebook or print. But it's also available. It probably won't be on the shelves in stores like Barnes and Noble, but you can always ask them to order it. Like it is available in their catalog. And also pretty much anywhere books are sold. I mean, it's available in the catalog that goes to Walmart, that goes to Target. Um, it's in the catalog of books that your librarian can order, but a lot of times they need to be told that you want it because
Mhm.
it's a big catalog and there are a lot of books.
Yep.
But it definitely, Amazon is usually where we sell most of the books, and you can get more information on them. You can read like the blurbs and the taglines and everything through there, or really any, like if you have a preferred book distributor, like Books a Million has access to it. Anywhere that sells books, if you ask them, they can order the books.
Awesome. Excellent. And I'm hoping to get it into school libraries. I'm going to be visiting school libraries and just locally and try because they're middle grade. They should be in elementary schools.
Yeah.
They're excellent. They're great reads. And then lastly, where can people find more information about you and your other books?
About me and my other books. Like you said, most of my books are published now through Stag Beetle Books, so stagbeetlebooks.com. I also have a website that's Blaise Hues. I post on a few different places, social media, but most active lately on Instagram, which is just at l.blaisehues. It's Hues. Um, and yeah, I've got I got some more books coming down the publishing pipeline that I'm getting excited about, and we'll see how it goes. It's going to be another fun year with books.
Another adventure. Yeah, and if you want to potentially
Hmm.
submit to Stag Beetle Books, take a look. I'll put the link in the show notes and make sure you have everything you need. But thanks for the discussion. This has been great.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It was really insightful to co-author with Laura, and it was really insightful to discuss those things with her. If you're ever looking into co-authoring and you are looking for advice, if you want to talk to one of us about our experience more, we're happy to do so. I definitely recommend it. There's a lot of pros to it, even though there may be some challenges to get through first before you reach those pros. Like I said, I recommend it. So next week, we're actually talking to Tim Faciola. I realize now that I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly. I'll have to double check on that one. I feel like I'm overcomplicating it. Regardless, we're talking to Tim about him crafting a fantasy world for 10 years. He talks about a lot about how he spent so much time crafting this fantasy world before he was able to publish his first book, and now he's in line to publish all 3 books of this really big, beautiful fantasy story. So it's an amazing conversation. We talk a lot about the things he learned, pros and cons of taking so long to writing a book. And it's a lot of fun stuff there. So you want to tune into that conversation next week. As usual, if you've liked this podcast, you should like and share with your friends. Leave a review for me if you can, and wherever you're listening, because I appreciate that. It gives me great feedback, and it helps other people find it if it's something that you want to share. Of course, if you'd like to join me on the podcast, head to thecasualauthor.com and fill out the pitch form there. Or if you know an author friend who's looking to get their books out there or who's looking to get some PR, definitely send them over to thecasualauthor.com. We'd love to have them as well. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next week.